Well, what is a product-based operating model? Just out of curiosity.
Well, so there's probably lots of perspectives on that. I feel it's been really cool for me to be a decision scientist in a world of other really smart folks, but maybe filling a gap, right? That um, and it's been one of the most useful things to me. I mean, in my time in people analytics, is to have that background to come alongside other smart people from other backgrounds.
Well, I mean, what's it like leading a team of like 60 people that you've got over there at Target? Well, I want to know though, how does that play a role with things like employee listening and the team member experience? Because I know that's really important for what you're focused on at Target.
Yeah. So I think I mean, you mentioned team member experience, and whether we're talking about decision science or the product operating model.
Welcome to Directionally Correct, a people analytics podcast with your host, Cole Napper. Today's guest is Rob Dees, Senior Director of People Analytics and Insights at Target. Hey, Directionally Correct fans, this podcast is dedicated to you to help educate and entertain you on how to effectively bring workforce intelligence and AI into the workplace. If you're looking to stay connected to the podcast, make sure to subscribe to Directionally Correct Substack newsletter, watch videos on Spotify or YouTube, or listen to the podcast on your app of choice. If you're looking to build up your skills this year, sign up for the Data Driven HR Academy at datadrivenhracademy.com, where you'll learn key concepts from Cole's book, People Analytics. And if you're looking to hear from Cole directly, reach out to him at colenapper.com. As always, all opinions are our own, and thanks for being a listener. Well, I'll start you out with an easy one, Rob. What does it take for people to make better decisions, and what are the components that go into it?
Yeah. So I mean, as you know, Cole, like I think a lot about decisions. Sometimes you might say, I mean, overanalyzing decisions, but haven't really been, my background being in decision science. I mean, I think the thing that I most think about, even in my own decisions, is like this three-legged stool of decision making, of decision quality, and so what that looks like to me is, hey, there. I mean, we don't have a decision if we don't have alternatives. So there must be, when one of those stools is like, hey, how are we generating creative alternatives? And I mean, understanding what's in the decision frame, what's not in the decision frame, the realm of feasible, possible, etc. But then the second stool is very much about the information that we have, right? I mean, that would relate to any uncertainties that we face or risk preferences. I mean, but then the third leg is actually our preferences.
Mhm.
And so, I mean, have we, I mean, clearly defined our objectives here? Have we uh, set up a value or utility model that, I mean, the math model essentially to reflect what we're hoping to achieve in within that decision frame? So, alternatives, information, and preferences. And so, um, on that three-legged stool, I like to say we'd prefer to decide based on the seat of logic rather than by the seat of our pants. So, I oftentimes think about that three-legged stool and like what's the information, right? What are my preferences? What are the alternatives? And the way I really do follow and believe in this practice of value focused thinking, is published by a longtime professor at Duke named Ralph Keeney back, I think it was like 1992, was kind of like the entry level version of his work in the decision making field. And so I always like to put values, objectives, or preferences first, and then consider the other legs of the stool.
Yeah. Well, how did you get into the decision science field, and how does that help you with your role at Target?
Yeah. So, well, I got into it on accident, and I mean, I mean, I spent about a bit over 20 years in the military, and about halfway through, I mean, I was an infantry officer, um, and leading soldiers. I mean, in the combat arms, right? And going on deployments and living that life, and uh, coming out of company command in the military, I was looking ahead at the next steps in my career, knowing that like I just love interpersonal leadership, and so. Um, but I also looked ahead in my career on that career path that I'd probably sit on somebody's staff making PowerPoint slides for 6 or 7 years before I had the opportunity to be in command again. And so I threw my name in the ring to go be a professor at West Point. And because at West Point, they limit class size to 19 students at any given time. And the role of a professor at West Point is far more than being a professor just in the classroom. I mean, students are eating dinner at your house. You're in the locker room with them before their athletic events. It's very much about mentoring and just trying to help these young folks be prepared to be leaders in the military and be better at life, right? So, um, uh, I saw that as an opportunity for leadership. Was fortunate to be selected, and so the Army said, "Okay, if you're going to be a professor, we got to send you to grad school." And 3 weeks after coming out of, I mean, uh, I mean, uh, like coming from another place, right? I landed it in flip flops at Texas A&M in my first course in the Industrial and Systems Engineering department. It was a decision science course. And so instantly on day one, they were talking about making decisions that are hard because of great uncertainty, hard because of multiple competing objectives. And this like made sense of like decisions in combat and just everything I'd had to do in my career up to that point. And it was in that class that I decided to become a decision nerd. So really that's how I got into it. I think now in leading, you asked about Target, uh, but just in general, being a leader in the people analytics space and looking across the analytics space in general, um, we've gotten really, really good with like a lot of our data science models, or we might say AI, right, and handling information, right, and through the application of statistics and models, other things, right, um, and um, and really and truly what where we seem to sometimes fall down still a little bit is how are we clarifying the objectives, and and so it's kind of unique to be like decision scientist in people analytics or even in analytics, right, where man, like, how are we helping to uh, talk with the decision maker or decision makers, right, about the preferences, the objectives, and then how are we able to translate the results of an analysis we do um, to best support decision making, generating clarity and confidence in the decision maker. So um, I feel it's been really cool for me to be a decision scientist in a world of other really smart folks, but maybe filling a gap, right? That, um, and it's been one of the most useful things to me. In my time in people analytics, is to have that background to come alongside other smart people from other backgrounds.
Well, I mean, what's it like leading a team of like 60 people that you've got over there at Target?
Oh man, I would say that right now I feel like I'm living my people analytics dream at Target, and first of all, the team is amazing. I just we got I got five directors, and just in general, the quality of these folks, both intellectually and just as humans, makes it a joy like every single day. Whether it's really incredible. I'd also say like that as team size grows, right? Ways of working, the ways of working efficiently, um, and the amount of insight generated can be, in terms of ways of working, like a very much like it's very tempting for me because of the type of leader that I am to have a whole bunch of like catch ups and personal statuses and how's it going? What'd you do this weekend? And like that's very much who I am because I I really enjoy the interpersonal interaction, care about people, but I've also very much been having to learn about like the routines I set, um, and really try and drive us more and more into a like a product operating model for people analytics. Um, so um, there's, I would say that um, as the team gets bigger, these ways of working, and oh, by the way, how you bring insights together and synthesize them rather than keeping them in their silos, um, is really, pretty fun to figure out.
Yeah. Well, what is a product based operating model? Just out of curiosity.
Well, so there's probably lots of perspectives on that. And we've certainly, we talk about, words like scrums, and we certainly talk about things like sprints and all of those things. Really, I think about um, a focus on the work, a focus on the outcome produced, a focus on the routines. The shorter sprints, right? The production of, a prototype's worth about 1,000 pages of requirements documents, and that we're making progress and continuing to pivot. I mean, very very much a focus on the user personas, right? For things, whether it's a PowerPoint deck or whether it's a dashboard of some sort, right? Um, Very much, focus on the user persona and the decisions to be made by that persona. So
Yeah.
um, happy to like dive in more there if you want. Also, I'd love to hear your perspective on product operating model someday. I don't know if today's the day.
Well,
Um,
maybe we'll get
you know,
to, we'll get to it later in the podcast. How about that? Does that
right
work?
on.
Well, I want to know though, how does that play a role with things like employee listening and the team member experience? Because I know that's really important for what you're focused on at Target.
Yeah. So I think you mentioned team member experience, and I whether we're talking about decision science or the product operating model, like, one of the things I just talked about in the product operating model is smaller sprints and smaller distance between, things changing or insights being delivered. Very much when it comes to listening, very much an advocate for, uh, comprehensive and continuous style of listening. Based on my military background, I think very much of this about like sensors out on the battlefield. And hey, we may have the cell phone intelligence, we may have like satellite imagery, but we've got all these sources of intelligence that are generating a common understanding or operating picture of what's going on, right? And so, very very proud of the listening program we have here at Target that is very much both comprehensive and continuous. But then that you mentioned team member experience, and that's fundamentally what we're trying to measure. Um, and so, based on, coming together with, nerds from other disciplines, like we've constructed a value model that we call, and essentially uh, that has provided a North Star for our listening to understand the comprehensive set of objectives that our team has, right? And then, oh, by the way, we start talking about the psychometrics about how to measure those things well, right? And I think all of us potentially in our field would believe that the experience relates to things like engagement, and engagement would relate to like how that business delivers and business results, right? And so it's
Well,
really
does
fun
it?
also to,
Does it matter?
yeah, I would say it does. And so, without talking about any one organization's, data, um, I've found in multiple places, right, that this experience is definitely statistically related to, business outcomes, right? And
So
actually,
the
that's been,
service value chain model from Sears still holds up.
yeah, I definitely believe that, and I definitely believe that, whether it's a technologist that's making something cool in an app that's gonna, show up and, for the customer, or whether, I mean, I'm in the retail environment right now, whether it's somebody standing in one of our stores talking to a guest, right? That how, I mean, the team member experience drives, right? I mean, the team generates, right, every bit of value for the customer of any said business, right?
Yeah.
And so, one, you want the best team you can have, right? I mean, so you want to attract and retain top talent, right? And then while they're with you, if they're highly engaged in their work, it's going to produce better outcomes for whatever your business is doing. So um, that's, I mean, I've seen that to be true in multiple places, multiple data sets, um, and very much believe that. I mean, no matter what type of organization you're in, that the team, the people on the team, and how well they're engaged is the foundation of success.
Yeah. I mean, I saw you give an excellent presentation on this topic at the Austin, Texas People Analytics meetup. Shout out to Ethan Burris and Roxanne
Yeah.
Lotso, both previous guests on the podcast, for hosting that. But you gave some pretty interesting examples about, again, the relationship between team member experience and how it relates to engagement, and then the customer, customer experience and all of those types of things. But also interesting about the relationship to the employee value proposition. And can you
hmm
talk about that at all?
Yeah. So, in the years of thinking about employee value propositions, that I mean, my background. I mean, I said earlier on, like, hey, I really believe in this whole notion of value focused thinking, right? And like, I spent a lot of time building value or utility models, and so um, really, the way that I think about an employee value proposition, I mean, my head immediately goes to, okay, what's their value function, right? And what are the objectives that employees have, right? And then so the relative importance of those objectives, and then also like how they would measure success. I mean, Cole's. I mean, we could talk about Cole's buying a car or Cole's deciding on a job, right? But either one of these things, Cole has a value function, right? And and so let's say Cole's buying a car, and I mean, not making any statements about Cole here, but let's say he wants to maximize horsepower, right? And he really values horsepower. He also wants to minimize fuel economy. So those are competing objectives. Um, and then, I mean, let's just Cole wants the car to look sexy, right? And so he's got, but Cole has to decide how he would trade off these three objectives, and then also, I mean, how much return. I mean, say Cole moves. I mean, he's looking at a car with 300 horsepower, car with 350, and Cole has to decide, like, moving across that range of value. How important is that range? What returns to scale? I mean, maybe Cole just wants to have more horsepower than his neighbor, and his neighbor has like 300 horsepower, so he's going to buy the one with 350. Um, and that's what gets him more value, right? I mean, so fundamentally decomposing our values. I mean, the measure may be horsepower, but Cole just may be able to talk trash to it. I mean, he may just want to talk trash to his neighbor. I don't know, but so like if we think about an employee value proposition as a value model, right? Hey, folks care about like things like, yeah, sure. I mean, evaluating a job offer. How am I going to be paid? What's the level of flexibility? Right? What are the benefits? Am I going to like the people that I work with? Am I going to be able to work on things that I feel really well suited to work on? Right? Do I see growth in this company? Like do I see career? I mean, all of these things are objectives that we would bring to the table when considering to go to a place, go to a job. Considering to stay, considering how much we might engage on any given day, right? And so I very much see the modeling. I mean, the value models from my field of decision science as it's been the most productive way to build, measure, right, and make recommendations about the team member experience or employee experience. So. Um, it's been really like a really fun exercise that I've gone through in multiple companies now to think about what do the employees value and how much. And oh, by the way, like it's different for different personas of employee, right? And so how, I mean, and what that leads us to is making more optimal human capital investments to move the needle to further attract, engage, retain uh, folks at the company, right? So,
Yeah. So how does what you're describing relate to measuring something like what is the heart of a soldier?
yeah. So, I mean, so there is the company that is hopefully has a good value proposition for the employee,
Hmm.
right? But then also, I mean, the employee in this exchange for labor, right, is offering value to the organization. Uh, and so I see there's value models on both ends of this exchange, right? I mean, let's say, I mean, I decide to hire Cole, and Cole really, I mean, Cole comes on board wherever it is, because man, I see this as, I mean, really meeting the needs of my value model, and then the company perhaps is assessing. Well, I mean, we're making an offer to Cole because we believe that Cole meets the needs of our what we need from Cole in this job, right? And so, um, this notion of measuring the heart of a soldier. This was my first people analytics project, by the way. It was called Whole Soldier, um,
Give the
and
backstory on it.
yeah. So let me see. I went to West Point to be a professor in the systems engineering department, um, and I had finished my first year of being there, and uh, there was a research study to come in, where the head of recruiting for the military basically came and said, "Hey, I need you smart people up at West Point to think about how to measure the heart of a soldier." He was like, I need to know how to measure the heart of a soldier because I need to know who to recruit." Um, and so went on this journey. Um, and I mean, I pulled out of the classroom for a year and traveled around all kinds of places all over the military to essentially say, what is the Army's value model for what a soldier brings with, I mean, for their performance, right? I've tried to avoid using the word performance. I'll use it now. Um, but, um, but so, I mean, it was called Whole Soldier Performance. And it was essentially the value model that set the company expectations on, I mean, the Army's expectations on the soldier, right? And so, I mean, we came to the conclusion in that the best framework to think about was that I mean, we want a soldier that's strong in heart, right? I mean, the original question was how to measure heart, right? But we want a soldier that's strong in heart, body, and mind, right? And so um, that became a body of work, and how you measure heart, body, and mind. It became a way of doing leader check-ins. In the Army, we call it counseling, right? I mean, every 90 days in the Army, you sit down for counseling with your leader. And I mean, you'd have a check-in, essentially in corporate words, where like, hey, how's it going? Here's my assessment of you. Here's the analysis of what's been going on. And then can we have a conversation both about your aspirations and then the actions that you're going to take in the next 90 days, right? Um, and so that whole soldier model was essentially became a model for soldier performance. And once we established a very data driven way, right, uh, to measure heart, body, and mind, then we were able to do the math about like, okay, where are we finding recruits, and what would we look for in recruits for the military? How would we incentivize recruiters, right? And a wide variety of topics. So, um, in general, like I think that thinking a lot about these measurement models, and measuring objectives and outcomes that we want, right, has led to, uh, I mean, has been kind of like the trick for me, right, as a decision scientist in the people analytics field. From, I mean, that was 2008 when I started thinking about Whole Soldier, and man, I mean, super thankful to be involved in the world of people analytics still.
Can I take a side tangent here real quick? I'm just
Yeah,
curious
what's that?
from your experience in the Army, having 90-day check-ins as opposed to an annual performance review discussion. Can you give like what are your thoughts there?
Here's my perspective. So, in a business, we're constantly evaluating our business performance. We're constantly listening to our customers, um, and very much in a listening program, we would want to listen to our team continuously. We would want to have more and more continuous or frequent, uh, performance feedback. And I mean, we would want to mentor, grow, develop all these things. Um, I really find that, and there's a balance, right? It's not like every day we're going to sit down and Cole, let's have a performance check-in. In the military, we did, right? Every single mission, we would do something called an after-action review, which is, I mean, it's not an individual performance check-in, but we'd sit down and we'd talk about how did this mission go? And I mean, what went well, what went poorly? Um, and we'd pin the rose on different individuals to make different changes, right? And and it was really very much like a performance culture. But this routine quarterly, I found to be uh, much better for the growth and development of people than what I see occurring in your, I mean, standard like performance check-in at the end of the year. Um, and so I am very much about more frequent feedback. Very much believe that like being clear is kind, and um, in general, I mean, the frequency of it also provides better data. Um, as a people analytics person, right? When we have a more continuous stream of data, I mean, stream of data, uh, instead of having a once a year, right, block check, right?
Yeah.
Um, one data point a year is, I don't feel like very well helps us to understand uh, the value that people are contributing to the organization, and I don't know that that helps us as well differentiate between the value provided by different people.
Yeah, I want to come back to what you were saying earlier about employee listening and there being like sensing mechanisms or systems and how it provides intelligence. Um,
Hmm.
I think that's one of the things I've appreciated about people like you and about like previous guests, Kristen Sabo on the podcast as well, coming from a military background, where the word intelligence actually has a very defined meaning, and there's different mechanisms by which intelligence is gathered, and how employee listening is actually an intelligence gathering tool rather than just a
Hmm.
humanist pursuit to see how people are feeling that day. And so can you kind of talk about the differences in perspective there and why, approaching it from an intelligence perspective is probably more useful?
Yeah, I remember back to being a young company commander in the military and also sitting on staff. I mean, and we would talk about the intelligence estimate,
Mhm.
um, and even in the way I mean, right, even in the way we trained every young military officer on something called like the 5 paragraph operations order.
What
The
is that?
first paragraph, so like every mission. Was the way that we would communicate the plan was through this 5 paragraph operations order.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Um, the first paragraph is a situation, right? It's like, and so in the first of 5 paragraphs, and oftentimes, I mean, this might be like, I don't know. Side note, like I think about Directionally Correct, the name of your podcast, like it's awesome, right? It might be like we've got to issue a 5 paragraph operations order in 5 minutes, and it might be directionally correct,
Mhm.
right? And we got to move because we don't have time, or this might be like a 50 page, I mean, 5 paragraph operations order. But the first part is always a situation that includes like a look at the enemy on the battlefield, right? The intelligence about the enemy. It includes a look at ourselves, right? Like the assets we have available, like the history of what I mean we've been through, where we're at in terms of logistics or resupply, fuel, morale, right? And so up front, um, we would be gathering this to we would used to talk about it in terms of like a common operating picture, right? And people would have debates about what's, I mean, in the military, we'd have these debates about what's the difference between awareness and understanding, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so uh, I think that really the rigor in that process um, would be what would allow us to move from information to intelligence or from awareness to understanding, right? Um, and oftentimes that relates to success for the U.S. military. Um, there was an old adversary of ours like this. I believe it was a Russian general. It was like, we hate fighting the Americans because they never follow their own doctrine, right? Like, and like I take pride in that, having been in the military myself, because we very much would be considering the situation. Um, and we very much also would empower lower level leaders um, to understand the situation that they faced. Um, and that oftentimes meant like coming up with unique solutions that were not in our textbooks. I mean, the Russians had read every one of our doctrine textbooks and we didn't follow it. Right? Because we were very much focused on this intelligence and the situation at hand, and we put great rigor around how do we structure our thinking, how do we write the, I mean, even to the point where every lieutenant in the military is trained first consider the situation, right? And so that I take from that, and I guess the most succinct answer I would give is that rigor, that discipline, right, around collecting information from multiple sources, bringing it together to create understanding rather than just awareness, um, is where I might draw the tipping point between information and intelligence.
Well, before being in the army, you were an athlete, right? Like, tell me about that journey. I mean, I feel like you've done like a bunch of wild stuff. We're not even gonna have a chance to probably cover all of it, but tell us about that. And you're a big dude, soccer player. I didn't expect
Yeah,
that.
yeah. So no, most folks would. I mean, most folks would expect that the primary story to be something along the lines of football or something along. But I grew up in the military, like with my father being in the military, and I was an athlete from a young age and played sports, but we moved around all the time. And when we were in elementary school, we were in Germany for 3 years, and my parents made the choice to not live on the military bases, but like live in the small German towns. And so I think it was like third through fifth grade for me that, I mean, I ended up on the soccer team in the German towns that we were living in. And so when I came back to the US, I mean, at that time, soccer wasn't as big a deal in the US, but when I came back to the US, I mean, I was a leap ahead of most of the American kids that were playing soccer at the time, and soccer was my thing. Um, I definitely, I, um, in high school, I played both striker, like center forward, and also goalkeeper. Um, and so like, um, I was kind of like a power forward, if you will. And it was an interesting combo because, I mean, a striker is up there to score goals and the goalkeeper is there to stop goals. And so, I mean, as a goalkeeper, size definitely helped, range definitely helped. And just, but the tactics on both ends of those two positions in opposition to each other were unique dynamics. So I I ended up having, I mean, I kind of just missed the selection for the national team coming out of high school. And it was, but the notion of athletics and team um, really, I mean, very much went into like how I felt about the team in being a leader in the infantry and the army. Um, and then very much has come into my thinking about people analytics. I mean, and it really, a lot of the beliefs that I have about team go back to those years. Many years of being dedicated to whatever sports team it was.
That makes a lot of sense. Are you friends with like Clint Dempsey and Landon Donovan, or is that a
No,
different generation?
no, I would not say that, right? Like, I would not say that. And that, I mean, like, this was like early to mid 90s. So,
Okay.
like, most of those dudes probably weren't out of diapers by that point.
Who
But,
was that dude with the long ponytail that was good back then? I can't remember his name. He had
yeah.
like red
So,
hair.
oh, Alexi Lawless.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know
Oh,
him?
yeah. I have not met Alexi, right? He was even after, like, I was kind of, I mean, so yeah, I'm really aging myself here, Cole. Um, but uh, no, Alexi was like fun, really, really fun to watch. I mean, really entertaining guy to watch. And when I was in this kind of zone of consideration for some of those more elite levels, um, the the goalkeeper for the U.S. national team was really like he was pretty well known at the time. His name was Tony Miola, and he also had like long hair. He was like mid '90s. I mean, fluorescent jerseys with crazy patterns on them, like,
Hmm.
um, and so he was another like standout in terms of like being I mean, almost an entertainer. I mean, at the same time as I mean, being an athlete. So, um, but no, definitely, definitely can't claim to be. I mean, buddies with any high level superstar players or anything along those lines. I was, as mentioned, I just missed that level.
Well, the coolest thing I've ever heard you say was this phrase, "How do you hear your leader's voice in the dark?"
Yeah,
And what how does that relate to your time of like what it's like to lead on the battlefield? So a lot of the podcasts we've been talking about, being in a back office room, collecting signals, writing 5 paragraphs, all that kind of stuff. But what is it like to actually lead on the battlefield, and what is it like to hear your leader's voice in the dark?
yeah. And so you could probably say it one of two ways. I mean, do you hear your leader's voice in the dark? Or for the leader, you could ask, do your soldiers know your voice in the dark?
Hmm.
Right? And um, there, I mean, the human dimension in carrying out, I mean, endeavors, I believe, is more important. In fact, I mean, you could look at Napoleon, and there's a lot of different views on Napoleon as a general in history and like the aims that he was after. You could also probably argue he was a pretty effective general. And uh, but one of the things Napoleon said is that, I mean, and I'll have to give credit to my own dad for some of, I mean, passing on some wisdom through the years. But I mean, he shared with me that Napoleon said, I mean, the moral is to the physical as 3 is to 1, right? And so when you think about that, um, and also in the infantry world, I mean, it's very much about the human, about, I mean, about more than it is about the machine, right? I mean, you're not necessarily thinking about how to, um, I mean, employ the cannon or maintain the tank or keep the helicopter running. You are very much thinking about how to keep the human running,
Hmm.
right? How to motivate the human. Um, and the human is the instrument, I mean, of the application of combat power, right? Um, so in all of that, I mean, you can write the best 5 paragraph operations order, um, or you can, I mean, but if you ignore this, I mean, this element of morale, this element of leadership, right? I mean, you'll miss the boat completely. So one of the litmus tests that I would talk about, I mean, I'd reflect on myself with and talk about with other leaders is like, do your soldiers know your voice in the dark? Um, and oftentimes as a leader, it could be very difficult to understand like where to position yourself, right? Um, you may have a great plan for like, hey, these guys are going over here and these guys are going over here, and like where to position yourself can oftentimes be a big question. Um, And so one of the leadership things that like is imbued in me is like, if you don't know where to go, go to where your most miserable soldier is. Right. Like, um, and so, thinking about in the corporate world, right? Like, are we staying over here at headquarters, I mean, under the just, wonderfully curated air conditioning and fluorescent light bulbs? Or are we out there? I'm in the retail environment, so I naturally think of, are we out there in the store, creating empathy and understanding with what they face on a day-to-day basis? And in the right balance of pulling yourself back as a leader, generating a plan, right? And then, oh, by the way, also going to interact with those people that are carrying it out, right? Um, and so this whole notion of like, do your soldiers know your voice in the dark? Um, it really comes down to in critical moments, um, when things seem dark, uh, when there's a crisis. Like, have you spent enough time, um, that I mean I think about this in a military context, that I could walk up behind a soldier that's manning a guard post or in their position or whatever it may be, and just by speaking, they would literally know my voice in the dark, and that they would be able to take comfort in the fact, hey, the boss is here, and both that the boss cares, and that the boss has a plan, right? Um, and so this one sentence, "Do your soldiers know your voice in the dark?" Um, I think is also broadly applicable in, uh, in our, corporate world or civilian work environment, right? So it's definitely. We talk about a conversation. We talk about listening to our employees, but then also this conversation, we would have to respond, right? And so it's almost like a litmus test on how well are we responding, based off of what we hear.
Yeah. Well, I want to come back to decision science for a second. We
Yeah, man.
can't go a podcast without talking about AI. How does
Okay.
how does the decision science frameworks that you're deploying, how does AI change them? How does it augment them? How does it deal with, situations with multiple competing objectives? Like what do you think about all that?
Yeah. So up front, like the first thing, I come back to is decisions, because
Mhm.
I come back, and I come back to that three-legged stool. Um, And so we think about AI, generative AI, we think about data science, we think about predictive models. We think about, all these things. Um, and largely, like, what the models and machines have become very good at is helping us to understand information.
Mhm.
And so I naturally go into like, immediately when I say that, I see like Bayesian probability models, right? And like updating our information based off the revelation of new information. Um, like in the machine is becoming very, very good, right? At leveraging, collating and leveraging all this information, right? Um, and then when I think about alternatives, right? I mean, it's very easy to seek input from a machine, right? To help think about and generate creative alternatives, or decision levers that you could pull, right? Um, and But at the end of the day, in this human and machine interaction, the decision maker has to own the preferences, right? And so we think about like this, for instance, this whole field of prompt engineering. Um, right? I oftentimes like to think about it like structuring an optimization problem, right? Where we have an objective function, I mean, subject to some constraints, right? If you think about like, um, I mean, a first course in linear programming, I mean, we would teach like the visual method of linear programming in two dimensions, right? Where like you draw the feasible space, right? I mean, and eventually we start talking about convex sets and all those things, right? But like the the objectives that we give, right? Like we're trying to maximize profit, we're trying to maximize, engagement, we're trying to maximize whatever it may be, subject to these given constraints. And that also sounds like a lot of what I hear about a successful prompt, right? Um, and so I really think about the humans owning the objectives and the machines being really good at helping with information and alternatives. Um, that would be like coming from that basic decision science lens, like what I would view as like coaching for humans, um, is to be really good at codifying objectives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's the initial response. What are your thoughts, man? I know you think about this a lot.
I don't think about anything, man.
Yeah, you do.
I think about how can you use, well, first of all, if you're using any kind of decision science framework, it implies that you have mechanisms by which you're receiving information from multiple different perspectives. A lot of teams don't have that. And so my first thing is like, hey, how do you get information that's coming in from multiple different perspectives? How do you find ways of quantifying that? Right. And because that's not, if you don't have your right data infrastructure in place, AI is not going to be able to help you at all. It's basically just
Right.
another chat bot. But if you do have those mechanisms by which you're receiving the information, it can be multimodal in an AI driven world. Then how can you construct, like the thing that I like that you said is, you set the objectives and then it can come in and answer from multiple different perspectives, give competing scenarios and those types of things. And I mean, one of the understudied areas I think in people analytics, but I suspect you're more of an expert on than I am, is in optimization models and how they can play a role in those situations. And so I feel like AI could probably help in that component, but you might even want to go back to more traditional systems for optimization models for helping out in that situation. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, and of course, like, much like folks are saying, "Hey, the computer can write code for you."
Yeah.
Computers can run optimization models.
Yeah.
Um, and so, if we revisit the basic form of an optimization model, we generate an objective function
Hmm.
that looks very much like a regression equation. All right, that hey, here's the different decision variables we have that we can choose,
Hmm.
and it spits out an overall value. So, um, but then we have all these constraints, like, hey, x1 is no greater than 5 x, like there's all these constraints, or the combination of these variables can't add
Yeah.
up to more than, have to be less than or equal to this, right? So you've got the objective function, you've got all your linear equations beneath it, right? And then,
Hmm.
oh, by the way, we can use matrix math, right, to solve these things. So and then there's large scale optimization, right? It gets more and more, and computers help us with that, right?
Yep.
um, but when I come back to this notion of owning the objectives, um, I really come back to like value focused thinking. And hey, I come all the way back to like this whole soldier model. Like, okay, the objectives are a soldier that is strong in heart and body and mind. Here is the data structure, right? That would help us to understand measurements
Yeah.
of heart, body, and mind.
If
Um,
I don't have a whole
and
lot of heart, I better have a lot of body and a lot of mind
right, right,
to
yeah. That
compensate.
reminds me. That reminds me a lot of like we used to say when I went to ranger school. It was like you can either be a smart ranger or a strong ranger. like um, and uh, and so like, but that highlights the point that there's trade offs, right? You
Hmm.
could either be really smart or you could be really strong, right?
Yeah.
And the way that the mix, right? It matters, right? And so, just in general, an optimization model has that in its characteristic nature, is that there's these weights, right? Like, um, let's say I'm selling cars again. Let's go back to cars. Well, as a car company, I may have 20 different models of car. Well, each one generates a different amount of profit,
Hmm.
right? And so Am I trying to weigh in and sell? Am I making more of the really expensive model that may have more profit, or am I trying to produce a whole bunch of the, less expensive vehicles and sell more of them, right? And how would I achieve my optimal profit based on the mix of cars I present, right? Like,
Yeah.
um, and so that's an optimization problem, right? Um, and and so but the different a number of cars that or car models that I make, right, is a choice that I have, right? So these are decision variables, right? and and so as I think about, like, say the employee experience, these are things that we can offer to employees. How much do I spend on benefits? How much do I pay? How much do I invest in a mentorship program,
Yeah.
right? Like, how much do I invest in, like, team building and generating a sense of belonging in the team, right? Like, and all of these things are different decision variables that we have as leaders, right? Both leaders, like frontline leaders, and also like corporate leaders of leaders. Um, and so when I say making optimal human capital investments,
Hmm.
right? That's what I mean. Hey, CHRO, if you have $10 million to spend, where are you going to put it?
Yeah.
Um,
We're definitely gonna have to talk about my everyone gets paid the same theory at some point together because
that sounds good.
this very much tracks with that. But do you want to join me in Cole's Corner?
Sure, let's do it.
Awesome. Welcome to Cole's Corner. So let's start out with some rapid fire. The first question I've got for you is, if you weren't into people analytics, the military, soccer, would you have started a Texas barbecue restaurant?
I was immediately going to say cooking, right?
Yeah.
Like, um, so having gone to, I talked about my journey at Texas A&M.
Mhm.
About the same time that I entered the field of decision science, I learned about barbecue pits, and so very much like enjoy cooking barbecue. My current area of learning is wood fired pizza, um, and there's another long story behind that one, but I definitely enjoy good food and gathering people, right? Like, so, I can't help but, like, when I drive through vacant buildings in downtown areas, be like, man, that would be a cool, like, whatever kind of joint, right? Like, um, and
What's your best meal? Like, what's the best meat you cook?
um, so I would say that I'm pretty darn good at brisket.
Hmm.
I'm pretty good at ribs. Um, but I think my favorite thing that I make is like fajitas, and I found this like
Mm.
Costa Rican sauce. It's like this cream sauce. So I'll make the fajitas by like smoking the fajita meat for a while, like really low temperature smoke, getting some of that smoky flavor in there, and then go super hot on. To crisp up the outside, right? And like, um, but then the sauce is like this creamy sauce with, a variety of things in it that, like, the combination of the cream, and there's some, instead of just like bell peppers and onions, I really
Mhm.
prefer like jalapenos and onions.
Mm.
And so there's a little spice, a little creamy, a little smoky. Um, my mother-in-law says it's the best thing I make, so I'll take it.
Pretty soon you're gonna have a cooking show on the Food Network.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
We'll see.
No,
Well, what's the place that you've never been to that you'd most like to go and why?
the place that I've never been to. Um, I would say I'm really intrigued. I've never been out to see the redwoods in California,
Mm.
um, and so, like, um, I really enjoy. Um, I've been in a lot of places in the world, um,
A
and
lot of sand, probably.
some sand, but also like living in Germany as a kid, and my parents taking us on ski trips in Switzerland, and um, like a variety. I've seen a lot of places, but like and a lot of times in nature, like you realize like how small we are and how grand, I mean, this whole thing is, right. This how did this come to be, I mean, and debating, I mean, design and why are we all here, and but just the majesty of nature, and I've never been to see the trees, um, and just thinking about the massive scale of these trees, I just want to stand there and look up at them and just feel like, I mean, like I don't know, this is some huge trees, man. Um, and so
Some big
uh,
trees.
yeah, I'd like to go check them out, and I'd probably find somewhere pretty good to eat along the way.
There you go. If you were a character in any book, TV show, or movie, who would you be and why?
Is that, yeah. I've never really contemplated that question.
Well, now you
Um,
will.
so I know that at different times, folks have, I mean, totally different than a movie character. I mean, I mean, people oftentimes think about what animal would they be and why.
Hmm.
Um, I'd probably be a big friendly bear. Um,
But that's not the
but
question.
yeah, um, I, in a sense, this quick answer. I don't know if it's my final answer, but it's my quick one. Uh, I think back to the Matrix, um, and I think about the combination of the interpersonal dynamics going on in the story, and then I also think about the notion of the Matrix and all the information, um, and living in this. I mean, world where you constantly have all of this information
Hmm.
going on. My head is very much it does, I can't stop.
So you
But
are the
then all,
Matrix. You're not a character in it.
like um I would
You're the
say encounter,
architect.
yeah. And what was it, Neo, right? Is it Neo that
Neo,
was
Morpheus, all those
yeah,
people.
yeah, yeah. I could see, I mean, I'd probably engaging with people and engaging with the Matrix. Maybe that would mean Neo.
Okay. Look at you, Neo. I like it. That's a good one. All right. I got one big question for you. You've served as a leader in very high stakes situations where you had to live with the consequences of both kind of your thoughts on decision science and people analytics theories that you had to put into practice in real world. Where do any of our theories go wrong based on your experience?
I think a lot of times we have a tendency to go wrong when we um, consider limited information. Um,
Say more.
and so there's a lot of times when, hey, out of our listening program, there's a lot of sentiment, right? Um, and that might be what people are saying or what people are feeling, right? Um, but then many discussions I've seen in the people analytics space consider sentiment by itself without also considering what we see. Um, and the one of the things that I'm most excited about is the synergy of what people say and then also what we see and what we might call operational human capital metrics, right? And um, sometimes I think the error can be, I mean, so people come from different disciplines to people analytics, and that's one of the greatest things about people analytics. But I mean, any strength we have applied in excess can also become a weakness when we stick to our lens or we stick to our data set and we don't bring that next to the other person's lens and the other person's data set. I think we can oftentimes either solve the wrong problem or solve no problems at all, right? Um, and um, and so I'm very much I mean, both in my team and I think for the field would be advocating for, right, the combination of skill sets, the combinations of data sets, right, and Oh, by the way, that places a heavy emphasis on the activity of data engineering, right? Um, and oh, by the way, which also leads to preparedness for AI, because as you mentioned earlier, if we don't structure
Mm-hmm.
the data, we can't. I mean, and document the data. I mean, um, it can become more dangerous just to hand it to AI, right?
Sure.
And commit the same problem, either solve no problems um, or solve the wrong ones, or even create new ones. So,
Yeah.
um,
Well, I think you have a question for me. Do you want to come back to that now about product
yeah.
and all that?
Well, I will. So we mentioned the product operating model. I might make the question a little bit more general.
Okay.
Um, so I've been heavily influenced in thinking about how to design a people analytics team, both by David Green and Jonathan Farrar.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I've had some really stimulating conversations with Richard Rosenau about how to design HR.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and whether it's operating model for people analytics or operating model for HR in general, like I would ask Cole, like what does Cole see in the future of uh, how we, I mean, structure both people analytics teams and HR.
Yeah. Yeah, we've chatted about Richard's model on the podcast before, and I was very gracious to both David and Jonathan. They both wrote endorsements for my book, so I was very appreciative of that. In terms of kind of being a part of that lineage of people analytics techs that have been going on, and Insight 222 has done great work with how they put together those things. I've always focused my efforts because like some people always focus on like what do the top 50 people analytics teams or less, how do they operate? And I've always, because they get so much love, I've always tried to kind of like counterweight that with what about the 50 plus teams, like everybody else.
Right. Yeah.
And because
What
they're,
about what about all of us average people?
well, what about what I mean, because this is the vast majority of the field are on those teams. And
Sure.
frankly, they're too small most of the time to do the Insight 222 model, to follow a platform based model or a product based model, like things that Richard has put forward before. So what do you do in those situations? And then AI complicates things even more. um, when AI first entered the equation, I talked a lot about the inquisitor and the change agent was kind of my rudimentary model, which is you break down analytics. It's really three steps. It's asking the right question, it's analyzing the data, and then taking action based on it. And I think as time progresses, it hasn't fully manifested, but as time progresses, AI is going to take over the entirety of the second step. It's going to analyze all the data, which is where we spend 80% of our effort right now. And so a future operating model of people analytics is going to have to take that in consideration. It's going to be much higher on consulting based skills and change management, because that's about asking the right questions, being in tune with the business, and answering the things that matter. And then the second part is taking action based on those. So it's not enough just to be overhead and not take action, all of those types of things. So that's my one comment there. Interestingly enough, I just published an article with Angela Lemathon and Alexis Fink about how AI will change work and how it won't change work. We actually thought about tackling the HR operating model in that one, and we decided against it just because it a lot of times if you go, it depends on how far into the future do you want to look. And I am more the type of person who wants to go and be truly disruptive. So what does a truly disruptive model look like? But then you're getting so far into the future that it looks more sci-fi than reality. And so I would say in the short term, I see a lot of the Ulrich model, the centers of excellence, HR business partners, and shared services. You've already been seeing for years, even before AI, that the shared services and COEs have been sort of collapsing into one already. And I just see in the near term that trend accelerates. And I
Yeah.
actually see the one radical thing I would say is, and this goes with the Inquisitor and the change agent, is I think people analytics professionals need to be kind of the strategic HR business partner of the future, right? HR business partners have supposed to have been doing that all along. We could debate on the effectiveness. There's a wide, I would say there's a high variance there. There's some really great ones, there's some really awful ones, and everything in between. and we need to lower that variance. And I think data and AI skills are going to play more of a role in what that looks like. And so one of the things I've been saying is AI workforce transformation is kind of the term of the year for 2026. And what skills do you need to be able to engage in the right AI workforce transformation? It's you need to understand data, you need to understand technology, you need to understand AI, and you need to understand the ability to bring about that change in your organization. People analytics is probably the closest to having those four skills at most organizations, and HR business partners are not. But HR business partners are typically the ones that are going to be tasked with undergoing that transformation. And so I see that as like how AI workforce transformation transpires will fundamentally change HR. And then whatever HR looks like on the other side, that's when it's going to be rife for the opportunity to disrupt the HR operating model. And then again, I could give my opinions on it. I actually saw a guy attempt this on LinkedIn not that long ago, and he got pilloried, because everybody's like, that's stupid, that's stupid, that's stupid. And frankly, he did have a lot of stuff in there I disagreed with, but I commented to him, I was like, I just appreciate you being brave enough to put this out into the world, right? Because not many people are thinking in terms from a first principles standpoint about what if you ripped out all of HR and you built it again from scratch in the age of AI, what should it look like? Most people aren't
Yeah.
thinking in those terms, and so I try to think in those terms. I just don't know if the world is ready to hear my thoughts on it, frankly.
Yeah. So like it's a really interesting thought, and I think about like kind of tied to some of the frameworks that Richard's been talking about. Like Richard very much highlights like these capabilities of shared services, analytics, data and analytics, technology, right? HR technology and strategy, right? To talk about like these workforce systems, right?
Yeah, the workforce
Um,
systems leader, all that, the people, data, supply chain
yeah.
model.
And so then I think about like when you mentioned some of the additional things you just said, like the pairing that you just offered, to think about, I think is another layer of, to consider, right? Like the pairing of services and COEs, right? Um, and then analytics and the HRBP, right?
Yeah.
Like, and how those worlds interact. I mean, that's an additional layer, I think, really to consider. I know very much I mean, we feel responsible as a people analytics team to help with, I mean, the general data literacy, or data acumen of the HRBP, right?
Mhm.
Um, and and so like everybody's an analyst, right? Like,
Mhm.
and but then also I come back to what you mentioned there, um, in the people analytics model. Like, hey, so if more of these analyses are performed by the machine, the first thing I think you said was ask the right question,
Yeah.
right? Um, and I would ask you like,
Or to use your
what's
terminology, it would be like set the right objective function or something like that.
yep, yep. And so that's what when I think about the skills required, what skills do you think are required to be able to ask the right question?
You know, I think one of the things I found out is I don't think most people actually know what this word means. But
Yeah.
so I use kind of a proxy for it, which is critical and analytical thinking, or even sometimes first principles thinking. But it's inductive reasoning. Inductive
Okay.
reasoning is really challenging, because
Yeah.
we are so as human beings we're so swayed by prior experience and prior knowledge and all of the deductive reasoning that we've undergone. Inductive
You're
reasoning is
using
really challenging.
you're using Bayesian words. I like Bayesian words like
Mhm.
prior.
Yeah. I mean, I like Bayesian statistics too. I trained myself on JASP, if I don't even know what that is, but um, back in the day when I actually analyzed data all the time. Um, but what I would say is mastering inductive reasoning is key in that situation, and it is frankly a skill that most people could stand to learn.
Yeah.
What would you say?
So you make me think about like the scientific method that we all learned,
Yeah.
right? And I mean the word hypotheses and like a test against that hypotheses, right?
Hmm.
Um, But then additionally, like in this space, one thing that I'm seeing, like if we also go to the construct of like structuring the objective function, or I mean an optimization model, like it does feel like that there is a foundational need for um, I've seen a variety of folks in the people analytics space at times really indexing on consulting skill, soft skill.
Sometimes.
um, And then some of my observation is that when the appropriate amount of hard skill is not there, then knowing like what might be possible, I mean, or like
Yeah.
that that we um, we oftentimes don't arrive at the right question. We might arrive at sometimes an easy question um, that I mean might feel nice to check the block off, and all of us have done well and we answered a question. Um, but I oftentimes have found like there's a distinction in consulting ability. Like, is there real strong hard skill um, in the person that may be showing up and asking those questions
Yeah.
to even know what questions to ask? Um, and so that, I mean, that's one thing I think about. And so if we're talking about like things like inductive reasoning or
Hmm.
data literacy or uh, like I don't know, you take like a data engineer, right? And I mean, I know a lot of data engineers and massive appreciation. I mean, that was not my background. I've learned a lot about data engineering, but but oftentimes, I mean, a data engineer, like you throw them in a room with a bunch of executives, and it might not go well,
It might
right?
be the worst day of your life.
Right.
Your team may cease to exist afterwards.
And so, but also, like I see that in and then it's like there's different layers and levels where that which the data engineer knows arrives to the executive. And I've seen some people that are truly come from a
Hmm.
hard skill background
Yeah.
that are then able to also show up in a way, I mean, where that's all consumable, right?
Yeah.
um, and those people I have felt like are the folks that are able to truly ask the right question, truly understand how we might leverage the machine, truly able to maybe write the prompt, right?
Yeah.
And be the most useful in supporting decisions, right? Um, and so I hear you on the index on like consulting,
Oh,
but
sure.
I
I mean, what
also
I would
feel
say is, this is probably, I don't think I've ever said this out loud before, but I think you have to have different rooms in your mind palace. And a lot of
yeah,
people only have one
yeah,
room, right?
yeah.
And so, the hardest thing about hiring an analyst, especially if you have a small team and that you need them to wear multiple hats, is you got to find somebody who has the technical skills, who's willing to kind of go into a cave and work for a while and, potentially even do some data engineering if you have a small enough team, but also can leave the cave, talk to other human beings, understand how businesses work, be able to consult effectively, actively listen, and be likable. And
Yeah,
it's like a the
yeah,
purple unicorn that you're looking for. And so a lot of times you have to again run your own optimization model and say, what am I willing to trade off? The heart, the
right,
body, or the head of the soldier to get somebody into
right.
this position. But yeah, that's really what you're looking for. And the weird part about that is, how do you learn to have different rooms in your mind palace? It's usually like, a liberal arts education, maybe being a philosophy major, Western civilization, like all the things
Yeah,
that like have nothing to do with analytics. And so you just need to be like a well-read, well-studied person who understands multiple complex systems, and it's just like and finds curiosity. All of those things are a challenge, but it's hard to put it all into like one box or one profile.
yeah. No, and you just made me think about like some of the thoughts that I've had. And we we established a team called a people science team,
Hmm.
um, and I like to refer to this group as my exquisite collection of nerds, um, and like from multiple analytic disciplines, right?
Yeah.
So, um, I mean, there's data science in the room, there's behavioral science in the room, there's labor economics in the room, right? And that together, like in these different, um, I mean, in a way, like, so it's, and you're right.
I think I've
Most people
spoken
don't
with
have
some of
the,
these exquisite nerds before, it sounds like.
yeah, I mean, most people analytics orgs may not have the luxury to have multiple disciplines in the room, and they may have to be thinking about what rooms, what mental rooms, as I think you referred to it as, like, I
Yeah.
mean, what trade-off of mental rooms am I looking for in the one person that I can hire?
Yeah.
Um, but that, I mean, that in multiple people, I mean, I'm seeing this structure for a people science team. I mean, new things are coming out like every single day that, um, when you do have these multiple people from multiple disciplines together working almost, I mean, sometimes I think of them as like the beehive, right? And like the things that are produced are greater than the sum of the inputs. Um, and so just really excited about that. But then also, like in practical sense, for a lot of folks out there, I mean, I think it does come back to that optimization problem. What trade-off of skills am I looking
Mhm.
for, given the constraint of the total number of people that I can have, or the total number of dollars I can spend, right? Um, how am I optimizing to? I mean, my team, right?
Yeah.
To deliver the most analytic value to the organization that I can, right? Um,
Absolutely. Yeah.
uh,
Well, do you want to do some what am I reading?
let's do this.
Let's do it, man. We're on a marathon
Yep.
today. All right. For people who are listening to the podcast, they'll know I've been on a tear recently talking about star performers. I've been on a tear probably since the podcast has started, but we've covered it a lot lately. And so we've got a new article just published by Herman Guinness, who is a part of kind of that, Guinness and O'Boyle research on star performers. And a lot of what has been done up until this point has been on just studying star performers as they exist. But this is talking about how to increase your number of star performers. So basically, how do you create them, and shepherd them along in their careers to make them become star performers? And so this is how to allocate resources to create more star performers. And so he has 5 steps here. Use potential based allocation in early years. So, allocating resources based on their potential, not necessarily their current performance. Shift to performance based allocation in later years. So, they start with the potential and then move to performance. Avoid relying solely on performance from the start. Be deliberate about timing and giving strategic allocation shapes star emergence. So if you don't give them any kind of allocation of resources, they're probably not going to become a star performer, or be, like what you might call a false negative. So what did you
Yeah.
think about this one here, Rob?
So I mean, I really like the thinking that the thing that like came to mind was that the most difficult of those steps might be rewarding based on potential
Yep.
early on.
No one does it. No one does it.
Um,
Like nobody.
right.
And it's even harder to identify who that potential, who, like, what is potential,
yeah,
who has it,
yeah,
and even rewarding for it at the
yeah.
earliest phases possible.
So potential is not, I mean, it's natural. I mean, performance is like a point in time measure,
Hmm.
and potential is a forecast,
Yep.
right? So, and oh, by the way, early on, we're making that forecast with less information, right? Than we would be if we'd been observing it for, I mean, longer, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so, like measuring potential in and of itself is a more difficult task with less information, right?
Yep.
Like, um, and so thinking about that, how to do that task, right? I mean, one of the thoughts that came to my mind was like, uh, I mean, I started thinking about, well, what is potential? Well, potential is future performance. I mean, it's one way of thinking about it. I
Yeah.
mean, the
The
potential to
capacity
perform,
for future performance at higher levels.
right? And then you think about what's true at higher levels. Oftentimes, it seems like, hey, um, the scope is broadened at a
Mhm.
higher level, and I would have to be able to deal with, I mean, multiple things, right? More so than at an early level. Like, here's my lane, right?
Mhm.
Like, I have to be able to go across lanes, right? Um, and so, um, for me, I've seen several programs that were like rotational programs
Sure.
early in career, and it made me think about the potential merits of that. Like,
But even
if
the
we're bringing,
selection of those programs is typically
yeah,
just done through like, well, we hired this person from the right university. So you're essentially outsourcing your measure of
hmm,
potential to someone else, right?
yep,
And then certain people don't get selected into it, and that like who's to say if they have potential or not? The thought experiment I always run is like if an entry level person, whether they're in a rotational program or not, like if they started acting like a CEO acts, they would get fired, right?
right,
And so you're
yep,
essentially firing all your future CEO candidates right out of the gate. And what do organizations think about this? And like, do they have some way of accommodating people who might be future executives? Because chances are, those people are not going to fit in well in it, like as a group of just being order
yeah,
takers.
yeah. No, it's funny. It reminded me a little bit of my story. If I might go back for a second.
Hmm.
So, when I was at West Point as a student, like I had more. So the way that you receive consequences for, I mean, or discipline at West Point was very much like they ordered you hours. And when, I mean, if let's say I mean, your room wasn't clean, or you were late for class, or you were disrespectful to like an upperclassman, or so, whatever it might be, you got hours. And that meant on the weekend you had to get in your dress uniform with your rifle and walk back and forth on the concrete for however many hours you were awarded, right? And I graduate within my graduating class at West Point. I had more hours than anybody else, um, and almost didn't make it. So, but then once I got out into the military, a lot of the same characteristics that led me to have a lot of hours also were very helpful characteristics in being a leader of soldiers, right? And like coming up with solutions. I mean, and like I oftentimes look at my own experience, and I'm very thankful for that experience. But also, I almost didn't make it, right?
Yeah.
And
They almost weeded
and when
you
you
out for being good.
and so like, and I also look back at like when I went back there was a particular student when I was a professor there. I was like, oh god, oh man, this guy does not fit the mold. Like,
Hmm.
he was uh he was captain of the rugby team. I mean, the rugby team at West Point is notorious for getting in trouble. Um, and just in general, not the most. I mean, you think about the mold of like super clean cut and like
Hmm.
this and like these are not rigid dudes. These are rugby players, right? Like, um, and so like I was like, man, I I have to take this dude under my wing uh, to get him through this place. Because I know that once he gets out in the army, he's going to be one of the best leaders the army's seen, right? And I mean, thankfully he graduated. You know, it was funny when he did graduate. His mother gave me a graduation present instead of him. Like, um, I still have that espresso machine, Deb, if you're listening. Um, but but in general, uh, the I mean, we oftentimes do squash potential,
Yeah.
right?
You chew it up and spit it out.
Yeah. And so, like, what can we do to allow room um, for people to demonstrate the behaviors? I mean, we think about like, hey, I mean, speed of decision, decisiveness, creative alternatives, right? I mean, oftentimes our entry level jobs are not looking for creativity and problem
Mhm.
solving. It's complete the task, right? And so. No, that definitely brings us maybe some guidance, and even thinking about like rotations, right? Uh, I I I I guess in thinking about that article, like that's the first thing I come to. The first
Mhm.
application step is like, how do we have effective rotations so that we can see people in different, I mean, have to operate in different silos,
Yeah.
gain, I mean, both in developmentally, but then also for assessment, like how they do thrown into different pots of boiling water, right?
Well,
So
let's talk about something similar, because it's kind of along the same lines here, which is this next article called "Not All Success is Created Equal: The Innovation Cost of Extreme Success." So this is a post from Ozguz Akar. And he said, "What happens to innovators after they really hit it big? You might expect more success, but they tracked 236 serial ideators over 4 years at a giant automotive firm. And they found that experiencing extreme success reduced their next idea's chances of getting implemented. And they adjust for this. They said two mechanisms explain this effect. First, the ideators stopped working with other people after a huge win. They went solo on their next idea. And then second, they had an inflated sense of status, and their creative energy shifted from developing ideas to maintaining their star image. What do you think about this one?
you're only as good as your last pitch.
Yeah, that's true.
Um, no, I mean, um, I hear pride,
Yeah.
um, and so we've talked about things like heart, body, and mind as a framework for soldiers. Um, but I mean, if you were to consider like um, level of self-centeredness or selfishness or self, um, I mean, and there does need to be like we talked about this a lot with soldiers. There is a healthy sense of self that might result in like a level of confidence, um, but then also this sense of self can get out of hand, right? And in both of those two things, I hear self, um, and um, and so like where I would naturally go is back to like um, this notion of humility, this notion of gratitude. I mean, there's a lot of things that have to align in time and space for an innovation to work.
Hmm.
Um, and very rarely is it the effort of one person, right? Um, and one person's name may be attached to it, but it oftentimes takes an army to get across the line. Um, and the moment that we start to feel important or satisfied with ourself, um, I very much would observe like um, that a lot of the goodness stops, right?
Yeah,
And I
absolutely.
mean, same thing. I mean, dude, I'm getting older. Like, I mean, I've now
You're
like
Alexi
this.
Lawless's age. We've already
Yeah,
determined this.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So like, I also think about this in trajectory over time, right?
Hmm.
Like, um, I think it was Einstein that said like, uh, honestly, I mean, I don't even know if it was Einstein, but like this notion of like the more that I learn, the more that I figure out I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, and um, and so I think when we start to think we got it all figured out, um, whether in life or at work, right? Um, we start to introduce some serious problems and risks, whether it's risk to innovation or otherwise, right? So um, that's the first. That's where my mind goes when
Yeah.
thinking about that article.
It's interesting. This kind of goes back to your point about the matrix from earlier. One of these things I've started doing is it's sort of like the mind palace idea as well. Is I spent most of your life you identify with Neo. You go in, you're like, I could be the superhero, I could be the one. And I've started it like putting myself in the shoes of what if I was the bad guy, or what if I was the failure, or what if I was the character who didn't succeed, and like kind of
Yeah,
treating, because like seeing the whole the whole perspective of the human experience, right? What does it mean to be a failure? What would it be like if you were the inventor or ideator who created the awesome idea, and then you had to deal with the pressure of following that idea up again, and then you turn into this egoistic monster because
Mhm.
all you're trying to do is save face of
Yeah.
being the person who, yeah, maybe their best album was their last album, not their next album, right? That's a person who's suffering.
Yeah,
And
potentially, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
and so
yeah.
I just try to always kind of put myself in kind of both people's shoes nowadays, because I don't know, I guess if I don't feel like people extend me the same courtesy most of the time. And so yeah, it's I don't know, it's an interesting way to look at the world.
You made me think back to my first decision science course, and I would have to get so J. Eric Bickle goes by Eric Bickle.
Hmm.
He was my first professor in grad school, and I mean, so many things owed to this guy. He came out of like the Stanford School of Decision Science in the lineage of a dude named Ron Howard, not the director, but a
Hmm.
professor at Stanford named Ron Howard. Um, and in one of the first few lessons in his course, he just put the question up on the board: "What's an expert?" And like we spent the entire session in that class, like talking. I mean, conversation about what an expert is, and
Hmm.
he leaded us. I mean, or guided us into the place of an expert knows what they know and knows what they don't know, right?
Yeah.
And oftentimes we forget um, to focus on the part that we don't know.
Yeah.
Um, and as we think about our expertise, right? And then that can relate to like if I'm not keenly aware of what I don't know, I'm less likely to ask somebody a question. We're less likely to combine our ideas, um, and I mean, I'm much less likely to come up with something truly novel or innovative.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. Well, this last paper is neither novel nor innovative, but it is interesting. To kind of circle back to our discussion on AI from earlier. So,
yeah.
a new paper from some Yale economists called "Signaling in the Age of AI: Evidence from Cover Letters." A lot of these companies have popped up. They give the example of this website called freelancer.com that came out in 2023 of generative AI tools that'll customize your cover letter based on any job description, and how this will increase your likelihood of getting a call back later on by recruiters or hiring managers or what have you. And they did find that initially workers who had used these type of cover letters did receive a 51% rise in callback rates. However, the gain was short lived. And so the researchers modeled this effect over time, month by month, and they found that the gain actually started to diminish after only 2 months. And it went down meaningfully more over time. And so I thought this was an interesting one to bring up because everybody's talking about recently the prevalence of like fake applications and bots, and how generative AI is making so much more difficult to hire. And everybody thinks, oh, I'll just use generative AI and it'll make my cover letter better and my resume better. And then they don't realize that, like, actually, because everybody's doing that, that's making cover letters and resumes essentially useless as kind
Hmm.
of signals to hire people
Yeah.
from. But I wanted to get your perspective on it, knowing that you guys hire quite a few people. What are your thoughts on the role that this article plays, or generative AI is playing in hiring right now?
Yeah. I mean, I'll maybe come to observations from my current role. Um, I and I'll start with maybe a personal story. I remember when I decided that I wanted to be a professor at West Point. Um, and the system was, I mean, very much, I mean, even within the, I mean, in the military to kind of submit your application and your resume,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, and then you would get a call back if you were an interesting enough candidate, right?
Mm-hmm.
I made the choice. Um, I mean, I told you that I had a lot of disciplinary hours my first time at West Point. My my GPA when I went to West Point for undergrad, it was like 2.59. Like I was not like I was like more focused on other like and I had a pretty good military background, but I was like, you know what? I'm getting my butt on a plane. I'm going to fly up there and I'm going to walk around the hallways of that department and introduce myself to the folks that are making this hiring decision.
Yeah.
Uh, and because like I mean, much less analytical in the way that I was thinking at that point in my life, but I was like, man, like I've got to, I mean, I probably don't stand out on paper. I've got to stand out somehow if I really want to do this. Um, and, um, and so bringing that, I mean, fast forwarding like 25 years or 20 years, like I won't do math in public, but the, um, the thought that I would have is like very much like you said that I mean some of these things are going to become useless. Well, what does that mean, right? Um, it means that like selection would have to come back to um, more and more. I mean, what is discussed and felt amongst two human beings on either side of this
Yeah.
equation, right? Um, and if submitting the cover letter and all of that is intended to get the opportunity to have a conversation
Yeah.
and something we call an interview, um, if you're relying on that, I mean, you're probably not. I mean, if that's the vast majority of your effort, I mean, writing cover letters, you might be focused in the wrong spot. Like, I also remember coming out of the military. Like, here I am, like looking for my first civilian job, um, and literally, I had a resume, um, but 99% of my effort was in buying people a cup of coffee.
Mm.
like, um, and like, even if it was somebody I didn't know, I was like, "Hey, what you do looks really cool. I mean, could I just buy a cup of coffee and talk about what you do and learn more about it?"
Yeah.
And like, I would always ask, like, at the end of those conversations, like, "Hey, I mean, do you know three other people that I should probably talk to about, I mean, whatever was interesting in that conversation?" Um, and I think, I mean, like stock market's correct, right? And so, like, I mean, the moment that you have an edge, I mean, you lose it, right? And so, um, I mean, hey, I got this wonderfully generated cover letter from AI. Okay, cool. I mean, you might have an advantage for about 5 minutes, right? And so that's where my head goes as I think about this, really like placing emphasis back on, right? Like, what are you doing in the human relationships that you have?
Mhm.
Um, um, and I mean, I think it's definitely wisdom that folks that talk about like, hey, relationships matter, right? Build your network, and like but then I also come back to the previous article where we talked about selfishness, um, and um, in my experience, people are pretty good sniffers out of selfishness. And so if you're entering into these cups of coffee or entering into these conversations solely with a selfish aim of acquiring a job, right? Like I would check your own heart
Yeah.
to the maximum extent possible. And like, hey, am I going to meet this interesting person? Hey, am I learning more about what they do? Am I trying to offer them value in the conversation? Is there something that I could do to make their life better or something I could share to help them? And oh, by the way, like, who are three other people that I might want to meet to have another interesting conversation? Um, and that, and I'll go back even a layer further into my personal philosophy. Like when we see that aspect of selfishness, right, or attempts to control or manipulate things around us to arrive at an outcome that we want, right? That means that we're oftentimes operating from a place of fear or anxiety, right? And and it can be really hard in an anxious situation of looking for a job, um, to not like that anxiousness become fear, become attempt to control, attempt to manipulate somebody into giving you a job.
Yeah.
Um, and it's actually far, I found, is if you can take that anxiousness, if you can take every bit of anxiety and turn it into curiosity, the game can change. Um, and instead of like fearfully walking through the woods and wondering what lion or tiger or bear is going to eat you, now you become a curious adventurer, right? I mean, what might I
Yeah.
find around the next corner, right? Um, and so if I were to take this all the way back to like advice, um, that I mean, that's how all of this flows in my mind is in your
Yeah.
own individual search. Can you be curious instead of anxious? Um,
Well, funny thing I was thinking about is like, who are these people that are submitting cover letters? I've never submitted a cover letter in my life.
neither have I.
And like,
Yeah.
if I've literally, earlier in my career when I would be in like a job application, some actually require a cover letter. I would just
Hmm.
be like, I guess this isn't the job for me. Like, I just wouldn't do it. But
Yeah.
it is funny. I love the points you're making about buying people a cup of coffee and things like that. Earlier in my life, one of the things I've noticed is like a lot of people get the sequencing of these things off. Like they think of it if you have to, build a relationship or get like some kind of benefit out of a transaction from someone. They're like, okay, I'll get the benefit of the transaction first, and then maybe we'll establish a relationship second. And what
Hmm.
early in my career, I didn't really do that. I just was probably pretty antisocial, frankly. I just didn't. I was like, I would rather do nothing with nobody than anything with anybody. So I'll just be on my own. But like later on, I realized that like it's so much more important just establish relationships with people and then see if that goes somewhere, right? But don't look to just see if they can do something for you, and
Right.
then like maybe we'll have a relationship later. That does
Yeah.
not work, and I see that happen all too often. I'm sure you get the text
Yeah.
messages I get, where all of a sudden you see somebody loses their job and they want to be best friends with you, and it's like, well, maybe if we'd been actual friends before now, it might be a little different.
Yeah.
So
No, it's, I mean, at the end of the day, that's just manipulation,
yeah, exactly.
right? And, and so like, it's hard. I mean, it is hard. It is a struggle within yourself, right? I mean, to truly not be anxious and try to manipulate the world around you based off of fear.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not saying this is easy. Like, I mean, you, I mean, it's the same thing in combat, right? I mean, it can be a pretty anxious and fearful circumstance, right? Like, but you're not going to win, like, if you give that power, right, and bring less than your best self to the moment, right? And just in general, like back to war. I mean, it's so aligned with the principle in war. As a young infantry leader on the battlefield, we knew that like you can't get stuck. You can't. I mean, like, and we would deliberately try to get the enemy stuck so they can't move on the battlefield, right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, we did all kinds of things to try and like retain our freedom of maneuver and like to prevent the enemy's freedom of maneuver, right? And it's very much like coming back to this thing about being one person looking for a job. Like it can be hard. I mean, and I recognize like you have to battle with yourself to not manipulate the world around you and show up in a way to try and add value in the conversation before you get the offer. Um,
Can I go a different direction real quick? I'm just curious about
yeah, man.
freedom of movement. In movies, like military movies, they always talk about, oh, we're getting outflanked. They're flanking us. Did
Yeah.
military people actually use that phrase?
I mean, not. I mean, maybe not necessarily in the same like weird way, but like so. As a military leader, we had. I mean, one of the units that I was in charge of was a mechanized infantry unit where we had these Bradley fighting vehicles.
Hmm.
Um, and you think about fighting in the desert, right? I mean, and so those things can go pretty stinking fast, right? Um, and uh, and there's a mission called movement to contact where like, hey, you're essentially like moving, and you're kind of like trying to, I mean, trying to find the enemy might be also moving. You're trying to find the enemy, right, and then make contact with the enemy, right?
Hmm.
And And so there's very much this notion of flanking, and you wanted to be the fastest to flank, and you want to choose the right flank. And so, like in this unit, like as the leader, we had worked on this enough, like all of our formations, all of our different speeds that we would adjust up and down, and like how we would move with the terrain and adjust our distance between our vehicles based off of the terrain or the constrictiveness of the terrain. But by the time when we made contact, we had everything worked out to a point where all I had to say was right field or left field. And that, are we going for the right flank or the left flank? And everybody knew as soon as I called right field or left field exactly what to do. And you very much were trying to achieve the flank. And you would want to basically present suppression, right, from the front, and like you're trying to fix the enemy so that the enemy can't move, and then you're trying to hit their flank, make them fight in multiple directions.
Mm-hmm.
So I would definitely say, like, and I mean, you think about like soccer, football, like, I mean, you think about setting a block, right? I mean, you think about 4 linemen going one direction so that, right? I mean, the running back can go on their flank, right? I mean, it's not all that different.
Yeah. Well, I think I think this might officially be the longest Directionally Correct podcast we've ever had. I've been thinking about for a while doing a little bit longer one, so I'm glad we got to experiment with this today. This has been a super fun episode, Rob. Thanks for bearing with me through some of these weird questions
Good,
I
man.
have for you. But really great job today. Where can people find you if they want to reach out?
Yeah, I mean, folks could reach out on LinkedIn, and that's honestly probably the best place. If folks would like to have a conversation or a cup of coffee over something to be curious together, and just in general, yeah, my personal email, like I hardly ever read it.
No, don't give your personal email in here, please. Don't do that.
And I sometimes also struggle to read my corporate email. So,
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Rob. You've been listening to Directionally Correct, a People Analytics podcast with your host, Cole Napper, and today's guest, Rob Dees. Thanks for joining me, Rob.
See you, team.